Hey everybody, today I want to show you a plugin for DTF halftoning. And if you don't know what halftoning is, it is a process where we are going to not only remove the black out of this job for a black t-shirt, but we will also halftone the transition between black and the other shades in the job. So where you see these darker areas, that's where the halftones are going to appear. Now let's get to it by opening up the DTPREP from Lightning plugins, and I'm going to take you from top to bottom of the menu system. This first menu here allows you to save a preset. So if you always use 35 lines per inch and a 33 angle and a round dot, then you could save that as a preset by clicking right here and naming it. Now this next area here, no matter what your file is set to, it's going to show you the dimensions at 300 dpi. This file has already been set up at 300 dpi, but if you add something at 72 dpi, it's going to show you what that equates to at 300 dpi. So if you need to adjust the size, now's the time to do it. Now on the halftoning part, you can see this enable halftone is clicked. Without that being selected, then it's just going to remove the background based on the color swatch you have here. And that's fine. This does more than halftone. This will remove the semi-transparent pixels in your job if you don't select the enable halftone. So it'll knock out backgrounds. That is a bonus. Right here you can select between round or line tones. That is a preference. I use both, but it really gets down to what look you like in your halftone file. Now the frequency, also known as the lines per inch, this determines the size of the dot. The higher you go, the smaller the dot. Now in DTF printing, your machine and how tuned in it is really going to determine how small of a dot you can go. 35 is a good place to start. If you're leery, maybe drop down to 30. But if you push over 45, you're going to be making dots that are going to be too small, not to just print on the DTF film, but it also has to have a white backer or an underbase that is typically choked back. So when that's choked back, it will disappear if you use too high of a number. Now the angle really doesn't matter that much, not like traditional screen printing. 33, that has worked pretty much in everything I've ever tried. Now one thing I like to look at when I have a black background is pulling the levels up, and that's right here under the image adjustments. You'll see the levels right here up top. This shows you where the color is in the file, and as you can see, all of this shadow end here, we have quite a bit of black, which is this background. But you see how it plateaus here? I like to pull this slider at least to the right edge of this plateau. That just sort of gets all the blacks solid black. And when you do that, it will darken the file some. And to combat that, you can pull your midtones, which is right here, to the left. You see how you can pull and brighten that back up some? And then you can sort of preview the before and after. In fact, that just sort of boosted everything up a little bit. I'm going to go right back down to here and hit OK. Now on this enable color knockout, that should be selected, and you should click and now find that black background and click on it to ensure that you are knocking out the correct color. This bottom one, which is connected to here, this is going to represent the shirt color. So we'll go ahead and click run. Okay, now you can see that has processed. And we have this set that looks exactly like the levels that we just looked at. But oftentimes you want to go ahead and start with the slider at its default. That's a good baseline. And now we can look at the original. We can look at what this will look like on a black shirt. And now we can actually look at the alpha channel, which is what we'll print on our transfer. So you can see all the halftone work that has been done here. Now I know from experience of halftoning and printing out these transfers that when we have big clusters of halftones like this, it typically doesn't look good. This will look very blotchy on the final transfers. So I want to dig deeper into those dark shadow areas and eliminate these clusters. I like a transition to the shirt, but not a big mass like this. And we're going to start by double clicking on the shadow end, and that highlights. And then I'm going to use the up arrow on my keyboard to start increasing this number. And as this number increases, you can see that those halftones are starting to melt away. And I'm going to push this up and just keep pushing. And now as we take a closer look, you can see that we have our original protected area here. And then when this starts transitioning on the shirt, that's where the halftone. So you can flip through all of these and kind of see what it's going to look like on the shirt. And what this is actually doing is creating a mask, which can be seen here. Now, one of the things that you sort of have to get over in halftoning is if we go to the original and now look at the shirt, you can see how it took away some of the detail. In fact, there's a lot of the detail. If you look in this arm here, a lot of the detail is just simply gone. And a lot of that is personal preference. If you are fortunate enough to have your own DTF printer, this is something that you can experiment with, and you can try where you don't pull out all of these halftones and see how well you like this, how well that works out. But everybody has to find that place that they can accept as far as having a cluster and how well it looks on the shirt. Myself, I probably go on the more extreme side because in the end, I want this soft feel of the shirt. Now over here, you can choose to save this preset as well. Up at the top, you're just going to save the current as a preset and you can name it. This is really good if you have a lot of halftoning of very similar images, or you just like a standard place to start. You can always click and start over by defaulting the sliders. And when you click on Edit Halftones, this is where you could change that frequency, or you could go to a line tone, for example. And you see that recalculated, and now we have line tones in here. Now we already adjusted these levels, but down here you have a force halftone. And the force halftone is going to be done from this highlight end. And let me get up real close. So let's say you have a transfer that doesn't have much to halftone, but you're really trying to get tones all the way through. You could force a halftone by dragging this down. You see what's going to happen here? It's going to put halftones well beyond the transition from black to the darker shades all the way through the image. And this is put in there because a lot of rips like Digital Factory or Fiery allow that forced halftone in there. Now underneath that, you have this boost shadow amount. This is because when you halftone, a lot of times you lose the intensity of a design or how much it pops on the shirt. So you may boost this up, let's say 40. And that immediately brightens up everything. So when it's back on the shirt, you get a little more pop on there. Now when we go down to post cleanup, what the post cleanup is doing is eliminating the smallest of the small pixels. So you see these little crumbs right here? Those will never print on a DTF printer. And you have standard and high. So if you go with high, that's going to even go for a bigger cluster of pixels than just these little fringe dots. I typically stay on standard. And the last thing is the fringe color edges. This comes into play a lot when you have solid shapes. Let's say you have white text, big block white text on your shirt that you're halftoning, and a lot of times you get this edge of gray pixels that are not pulled in by the halftoning. This will help eliminate those fringes around the edge. So now we're going to go ahead and click apply. And what you end up with is your original file with its mask. And if I hold the Option or Alt key down on the PC, we can go in and actually look at the mask. This is your opportunity to go in and maybe chase out some things you don't like in the final file, or something that you don't think is going to add to your final design. Maybe it's just unnecessary. And a lot of times on a retail style piece like this, I'll go in there and I will edit. And how I do edit is you want the pencil tool, which is right under the brush tool, pencil tool. That will give hard edges. You don't want soft edges, black or white, in your mask. And you're just going to come up here, and with the pencil tool, you can use the brackets. And one of two things is going to happen. You're going to swipe across here and say, uh-oh, that's not right. Just hit the undo. And then down here, you're going to switch this to black, which is also just hitting the X key in Illustrator. And now you can paint away any of those stray areas that is allowing the color to show through. And lastly, when you're happy and it's time to output for your DTF printer, I always go to File, Export, Quick Export as PNG, and save the file. Now let me show you one last thing that is a no-no. Let's get in here really, really close. You see how all these edges are absolutely solid in color? There's no fuzzy, there's no transparent. That is what you want for DTF printing because of the white underbase. In fact, transparent edges on DTF files causes a nightmare for both the printer and the end user that will get a white halo around their print or underneath those transparent. But here's a mistake I see a lot of people making, is they'll go in and go to image size, and they'll decide to change this after the halftoning for whatever reason. So if I go down to 11 and hit OK, now let's look at those edges. Those are the semi-transparent edges. So do not do that. Size your file, halftone it, save it. If you need a different size, then you want to halftone that size. The other reason for not sizing down a file is you're changing the size of the halftone dots or this frequency. And if you make them smaller, you can make dots that are simply too small to print with an underbase with the DTF machine. Great tool, 5 stars. I used to do the same method. In fact, you can find videos of me using just Photoshop, but I use this about 99% of the time because it's that good and that quick.